and this is a great place to raise your families.
Thank you. Question 5 we'll start with Elliot Cutler. Obesity is a major health concern in Maine for adults and children alike. How would you go about meeting the national recommendations for physical education and reducing the availability of these foods in our schools?
Well, first of all, I want to promise you all that if I'm elected governor, I'm going to lose 30 pounds and set an example. Look, obesity, as I've said earlier, is a public health problem. It is a public health problem. And we need to wage war on obesity and tobacco use in Maine. I'll say it again, we need to wage a real war. And that means we have to look at every opportunity we have to educate, to practice preventive medicine, preventive care. And finally, we need to take care of the kids who already are obese and help them, teach them how to live healthier lives and lose weight. Now, specifically, I think we need to look at the relationship between our schools, which is where these kids are, our medical centers, our primary care physicians, and we need to link those three together more tightly. We need to make sure that kids in school actually learn about healthy behaviors and healthy eating. We may need to restrict the availability in schools of certain kinds of foods. I don't want to do that. We ought to try everything else first, because I really believe people need to be taught choice. It's been hard enough for me to learn choice, and I think you need to learn it at an early age. We need to connect our farms and our school lunch programs more closely together. That is an opportunity. And finally, I think we need to have some kind of statewide guidance or standard for physical exercise. Eric Steele told me earlier, I don't know, last week I think it was, Eric, 37 minutes a week is the average. I may have that off a minute or two, but I think it's 37 minutes a week of physical exercise is the average for kids in the state of Maine today. That isn't going to work.
Increasing minutes for physical education is working with teachers and working through curriculum issues. But you know, based on that diagram of the public health care system, I think if we put that out in the schoolyard and have them do a little hopscotch on that, they're probably going to get a lot of physical exercise out of that. But we can definitely work on that issue in the curriculum in the schools. But let me say this. This is how I differ from every candidate in this race. I have on my website an initiative, a policy, and it is designed specifically to increase economic development in the state of Maine through an agricultural economy. And I had just stated that the most successful business models are those that practice in a space that's a huge industry. And you know, the food system, the dietary food that we're putting into K through 12, that's a market that I want to work with state and federal dietary guidelines, get some reforms, work on a pilot program basis. We need to do some year-round growing in Maine. We can do that with state revolving fund loan models. That's how we work with water infrastructure. We get those folks that borrow paying back at an amortized long-term low interest. If we can displace the foods that we are feeding kids in our schools, look at the long term. This election is about moving away from talk about policies and ideas that are failed models. We need to grab a new model. We need a leader who's going to stand and make a priority out of including those folks that want to make that happen. LD 1140 was a resolution recently passed in the legislature that went toward the idea we need to make healthy food in our schools the next great accomplishment in this country. Maine will be the leader. I know how to get that done. I know how to get involved in local communities. I've done it my entire life. And I understand innovation, and this issue cannot wait.
Thank you. There's no question that prioritizing phys ed back in schools is absolutely needs to happen. In our generation, you know, kickball, and I mean, I don't know if they go to that extreme today. I think they're a little bit more politically correct about what they allow for activities. It was a little wide open back in the 70s. But we really sincerely need to get back to, a fellow once told me when I was a young man, he said, Sean, he said, I'm not going to share my wealth, I'm going to share my work ethic. Think about that. Maine has built itself on a good, hard-working society that has built that quality of life and place that we all enjoy today. And I know we always, as a parent, we have 4 young adults, we want to bring them into a better world and look out, so they've got it a little easier and a little better than we did. I mean, that's what our parents did, and that's just a parental instinct and achievement. But we got to think about restoring some of the things that I took advantage of when I was in school, the co-op program. We're losing 1 in 4, 1 in 5 are our young adults right out the front doors of our high schools. That really, if you think about a core root of our problem in a societal change over a couple of generations, that's what we need to jump on, as well as the dietary and activity things that these folks have spoke about. But that's one of the core roots of our challenges today. We can't continue to ignore that. We've got to give those young students the opportunities, the vocational opportunities, the technical training that they need, the co-op, so they can go out and work and get credits and graduate from school and go on into the work field. We have a real void of the working class, blue-collar generation here in Maine that this state was built on. Not everybody's going to, go on to get their degree and get a $50,000 job today. Those jobs aren't out there. So we need to restore that blue-collar economy in Maine by educating and allowing opportunities for those young folks when they get on to their work career.
Thank you. Like Elliot, I always get a little nervous talking about weight, but however, I will venture forth. We have to make it cool to eat healthy. As a matter of fact, I visited a store at Damascotta called Rising Tide. Started in the 70s when people were back to the land, thinking about growing their own foods, but guess what? It's strong, it's thriving, and people consider even more important, and it's also a business opportunity for people all over Maine to grow foods locally without all the chemicals that are added. But what was the most remarkable thing after the tour was a young woman and her daughter came up to talk to me about healthy foods. And the 9-year-old looked at me and said, "Senator Mitchell, what is your position on healthy foods in schools?" I have never been asked that by a 9-year-old before, so I think we're making progress and making things cool. We had some bad policies, plus also texting, which makes people sit a lot more than they should. We tried to build all the schools out in the country, so they rode school buses to school. We cut back on the school day, so we eliminated physical education. Not very smart. And then now that we're trying to revamp how we do that with the schools in town, parents are worried. We have to create safe neighborhoods so that kids can walk to school. I'm intrigued by the walking school bus. I am also very confident that the Governor's Council on Physical Fitness can become much more visible and be leaders out there. We've already eliminated soda machines in schools. We can lead by example and make it cool to be physically fit. And all these wonderful walking trails, young people are quite competitive. Just give them an opportunity to raise money by collecting funds for cancer or for anything. They're very involved. Let's not underestimate them. Let's give them the opportunities. I also keep thinking of that ad. I know it's sort of contradictory because it's trying to sell you ranch dressing when all the kids are eating broccoli opposed to ice cream. You may have seen that. But I do believe that kids are taught proper behavior, but we need to set good examples, not just in the schools, but in all government institutions or in hospitals. Change what we serve.
I believe the problem is parents in schools. I mean, when I was a kid, we'd get out of school, we'd go play football, hockey. We'd have all kinds of pickup games. You don't see pickup games anymore because everything has to be organized. It's not right if you just go play football after school. What we do now is our kids come out of school and they're texting or they're on a computer and they're sitting idle. In our schools, we talk about nutrition. We know there's a problem, but we take physical activity out of school and we feed them hot dogs and pizza for lunch. It's not the right way. We know the problem is. But let me tell you what I believe the real issue is in this state. In this state, all we have to do is make this state prosperous. Allow Maine families to go from 80% of the national average in earnings to 100% so they can compete and they can buy healthy groceries. Coming in a family of 18 kids, I will tell you one thing. My mother would love to have fed us a lot of decent food, but she didn't have the money. So we ate Spam. I don't know, I think Spam is fat with a little color in it, makes it pink. And so I think it's about having a society where we can teach in schools, and I think that's absolutely incredibly important. We also have to have programs where parents have access to nutritional information, and when they do, they have the resources to buy. And believe me, a lot of these kids grow up and they just don't get a good meal. And what I mean by that is they don't get it at home, and they get hot dogs and pizza at school.